The new movie Sinners is throwing Hollywood into chaos. Some are saying it's a massive failure, and others are saying it's a huge success. Ryan Coogler, director of movies like Creed, Fruitvale Station, Black Panther, got a very unique deal with Warner Bros. That nobody else gets. And some people are very, very mad about it. So I've been researching on how these deals with studios usually work, how much creative control they get, how much money do they make, and what makes the Sinners deal with Ryan Coogler very unique. To answer, is this a big deal or is it just marketing doing its thing? First off, it is really good. I think it'll be one of the best films of the year. Ryan did such a good job of storytelling, pacing, setting up the characters, building suspense. The acting was great, and I absolutely loved the cinematography. I'm so glad he filmed it in 70mm, and if you can go see it in IMAX 70mm, it is so worth it. It's one of the coolest experiences for filmmakers. You get that whole nostalgic feel where it's an actual film projector, and the image is moving around a little bit with the gate weave, and you see a random hair or dust come in there, and then the quality. I think if you compare to digital, it'd be somewhere between like 12K and 20K. It is insane how good the quality is. Also, they might have had the best, most cost-effective piece of marketing ever. Ryan Coogler basically went through different film sizes and what they did on Sinners and different formats you can watch it in. It got like 15 million views on Twitter and like 300,000 views on YouTube. I highly recommend watching it. They filmed it mostly on 2 cameras, I believe. One was the Ultra Panavision 70, large format film, basically the biggest film that you can get. And then you use anamorphic lenses to achieve this like really wide aspect ratio. I think it's like 2.76:1. In honor of that, I'm filming on a very wide lens, a Surrey 20mm anamorphic lens, 133 squeeze that has autofocus. So yeah, hopefully this focus is working. Otherwise, I'm gonna be screwed in post. Sorry, Spencer, that's my editor. And then they went full Nolan and used IMAX film cameras, 15 perf. Basically, they film it on large format film and then it gets rotated 90 degrees. So it's like the biggest film or sensor that you can get. It is super wide, shallow depth of field is insane. Again, go and watch it, especially in IMAX 70mm if you can. Okay, so let's look at the different deals directors get in Hollywood, starting from indie directors. The budget is under $5 million. Then moving up to kind of your average Hollywood film directors, that's around like 10 to 50 million budget. It's a lot of money. And then to like the best directors, you know, the Nolans, the Gerwigs, the Villeneuves, where the budgets are like up to 200 million and possibly more. And then compare those to the Ryan Coogler Sinners deal. All right, this isn't going to be 100% perfect information, but I think it's probably close. So for the indie films, you know, think Sean Baker, Anora, another great movie. Their fee is going to be around $100,000. Now that sounds like a lot, but if you're somebody like Sean Baker who worked on his film, he said he worked on it for like 30 years, writing it for 15. That's not that much money, especially since like it did really well. That's not a big payday for him. And on the back end, so sales and all that stuff, he's probably not getting any money or very little. That would be the typical for indie directors. Now, in terms of who gets final cut, kind of like the final say in the edit, a director like Sean Baker usually actually would get final cut, but that's because he's kind of taking on all the risk and making everything happen. And then it kind of turns into like the studio mode where they would see the movie and be like, oh, this is actually good. We'll take it from here, Sean. So interestingly, you would get more creative control in these indie feature films. IP ownership, some control, possibly, but I think a lot of times the studio would kind of buy or take the film and they would own the IP afterwards. Budget size, like we talked about, would be less than 5 million. Anora's budget was actually around 6 million, I believe. And then distribution, usually the release would be a very limited theatrical release or festivals. I think they realized that Anora was gonna be a really good movie or is a good movie and that it would do really well. And so they put a ton of money into the marketing of it. This is one of those weird facts where movies like Anora or Everything Everywhere All at Once, they actually put way more money into marketing the movie than the actual production of the movie. So I think Anora, the budget was around 6 million. I think they put like 15 million into advertising it, getting it into the Oscars and all of that stuff. It's a little weird to me. So that's what the typical kind of indie director deal would be. Now let's look at the average Hollywood director. This is kind of like the mid-level, the medium director in Hollywood. The average Hollywood director would get around $250,000 to $1.5 million for their fee. That's not bad, but that also is usually many years of work. So yeah, that's pretty good though. On the back end, in terms of sales, they might get a small net percentage. That word net is very important. So typically, I think what would happen is that they would say like, yeah, we'll give you back end, you'll get percentage of sales, but it's net. And then it never really nets money. It's grossing a lot of money, but then they have all these costs and, you know, lawyer fees and producer fees and marketing fees. And so they basically end up getting next to nothing. That's my guess. We actually had a similar experience where a director asked us to executive produce his feature film, and we met up with kind of the film lawyer, the entertainment lawyer that was gonna be the main producer for the project. And when I looked at the deal at the end of the day, basically it went like this. I would give them money to help produce the film. That entertainment lawyer would take a loan and also help a little bit. But then at the end of it, kind of my rights to the film would be bought back using the film's own money as it generates money. And then at the end of the day, I would only have a share of the net revenue. And so on a smaller movie that's not gonna make a ton of money, I probably would have never seen any of my money back because there would have been all of these costs and it would have never actually netted really any money. And so that is a really interesting point to note here. Final cut, medium average director, do they get final cut, final say on the edit? Rarely. Studio usually has the final say, and that's really interesting. Probably explains why a lot of movies don't end up being as good as they maybe should be. And I think that really sucks for a lot of directors. I could only imagine how frustrating it would be to work on a project for a really long time, put a lot of time and effort into it, and then you not getting kind of final say on the movie that you directed. IP ownership, the studio always owns the IP, so you know they can decide what they want to do with that movie, if they want to put it on this streaming service or that streaming service, or sell it over here, or make a sequel. They get to choose. You as the director get no choice in any of that. Budget size would be around 10 million, and then distribution would be nationwide theaters and sometimes international too. Probably if they think it has, you know, like a good chance in this market or that market, they're gonna put it in different countries. Then we get to the top dogs, the Gerwigs, the Villeneuves, the Nolans. I think Nolan is probably the top dog in terms of what he gets as a director in Hollywood. Their average fee would be anywhere from like 5 million to 20 million. I think Christopher Nolan would be on like that 20 million side. The rumor is that Nolan made $100 million from Oppenheimer, but that's including his fee and the back end, I believe. And so for Christopher Nolan, who's like the top dog, he gets percentage points of the sale, I think around like 20% they're saying, and that is gross. So that is not net income. So any ticket sale that happens, he gets 20% of that. Whatever the studio would normally make, he gets 20% of that. And that is huge. That is a really, really big deal to have gross versus net. If it's net points, you're probably not gonna make much. Gross, you're probably actually gonna make a lot. And clearly, I mean, it was a very successful movie. He made a lot of money from that. 100 million, not bad. Final cut, Christopher Nolan, yes. I think depending on your clout, I could imagine that like Greta Gerwig maybe doesn't have the whole history of movies that she's done. probably wouldn't get final cut. Maybe. I'm not sure exactly what her deal was. I think Villeneuve, from what I've seen in the, like, for example, Dune 1, I don't think he had final cut, but then Dune 2, he probably did and had much more creative control. I think it kind of comes with your reputation. You know, people know that Nolan does great work, and not just once, he does it over and over and over again and makes studios a lot of money. So yeah, he gets final cut, he gets super high creative control, basically gets to do whatever he wants. But with IP ownership, the studio still owns the IP for the movie. So Nolan wouldn't own the IP rights for Oppenheimer, for example. So he doesn't necessarily get to decide what happens to the movie. He might have a lot of control there also. It might be, you know, negotiated like that. But in the end, the IP is owned by the studio. And then budget sizes are usually like 50 million plus. So Interstellar was 165 million, Tenet 205 million, Inception 160 million, Oppenheimer 100 million, Barbie 145 million, Denis Villeneuve, Dune, 165 million. One of my favorite movies. Dune 2, even better. Incredible. Distribution, that's gonna go everywhere, basically. It's gonna go in America, gonna go global. And then we get to the Ryan Coogler Sinners deal that everybody is talking about. All right, so we don't know exactly what his fee was, but probably around the 5 to 20 million, somewhere around there. It's a lot of money for sure. Now on the back end, from what I understand, is that he is getting first dollar gross. So just like Christopher Nolan, he is getting a % of the ticket sales before Warner even gets that money. He is getting it right away, and that is a big, big deal. He might make way more money from that than his actual fee was. So this is looking like an insanely good deal, but it gets better. So final cut, yes, he got final cut for his film. That is exactly what every director wants. That is a huge deal. Creative control, absolute. He had full creative control. I'm sure there might have been suggestions or whatever, but he had full creative control. Again, massive thing. And then we get to something that not even Nolan gets. The IP ownership of Sinners reverts to Coogler after 25 years. Now, at first I was like, well, that's not that big of a deal. Like, after 25 years, like, whatever, like, it's already made its money and stuff. But then you start thinking about a lot of the most successful movies, they still get watched. They still get put on to Netflix or Prime or Apple TV or whatever. They get re-released in different versions. There might be sequels. So after 25 years, Coogler is gonna get everything from this film. Plus, he can then make sequels or spin-offs, or he can decide what happens to the film. Does it go on to Netflix? Does it go to here? I don't know if Netflix exists in 25 years, but let's imagine that it does. He is gonna have full ownership of Sinners after 25 years. And that is probably the part that everybody is freaking out about. And like I said, at first I was like, I don't think that that's a big deal, but I think that is actually a massive deal for him. And in the future, it'll just be like a really, really nice cash cow that just keeps making him money because he's going to make all the money from it and he gets creative control over it. That is, again, for directors, that is like the pinnacle. That is what you want. And not even Nolan gets that. That is huge. You can sell physical goods, you can make documentaries about it, even remaking or expanding the universe himself. It's like having a 25-year time-locked treasure chest. I think that's how we should be thinking of this. And then maybe more importantly, it's that creative control over what happens to the film, you know, that it doesn't get exploited or misrepresented by the studio or used in a way that he doesn't like. Now, the budget size, from what I heard or read, it was supposed to be 80 million, but then, of course, things go crazy and they spent more. And Coogler actually covered 20 million in overages from his fee and back-end comp. So yeah, his fee and back-end, were really good. You can put in 20 million. Now, who knows? Maybe he's like, I just want this movie to be the best movie ever, and so I don't even care if I make that much money, so I'll just pay for it. And so maybe, you know, maybe he doesn't make that much money, but I think he's gonna make really good money on this. If not right now, in 25 years, probably gonna be pretty nice for him. And then distribution, it's going everywhere. So is this a big deal? I think, yeah. I think this is one of the biggest deals ever in Hollywood. And I think it influences the industry probably more than some people realize. Like if Coogler got this deal, other people that are really good filmmakers, really good directors are gonna be like, I want that deal. Now, then the question is that bad for filmmakers and is that bad for the studios? And I think it's not necessarily good or bad. For the filmmakers, it puts way more pressure on them, but then you also have a way higher upside if you do a really good job. So I think that's actually a really good thing if you believe in your storytelling, your skill, and what you can do. Put your money where your mouth is. You're gonna make a lot more money. If you wanna just kind of coast and like be casual about directing, probably not the best deal for you because this is way more pressure. Now on the studio side, it could be really bad because over the long run, they're losing the IP rights and maybe they make less money. But then it could also be really good because now Ryan Coogler had way more incentive to make this the best movie that he could ever make. And therefore, the studio gets an incredible movie, and this builds the reputation of the studio and makes them more money because it's just such a good movie. So I don't think that it's the end of Hollywood or the end of studios. I actually think it could be a great thing for both filmmakers and for studios. And I just hope that the system can change a little bit, that people like Sean Baker can get a little bit more budget and have a little bit more like peace and less stress to actually make the film that he can make and make it incredible and have a better deal on the back end, all that, so that it incentivizes him to do a better job and all that. I honestly think that this could be a great thing for everyone, and I hope it's kind of the start of the shaping of a new way of working with directors. I think the industry is going to be very different 5-10 years from now. Like our movies just going to be put on YouTube because that's where you would have a lot of creative control and have the biggest audiences and also be able to monetize it and actually make a living from your filmmaking. So yeah, I think this is just the beginning. If you haven't seen it, go and watch Sinners. Congratulations, Ryan Coogler, on the deal. I honestly love this whole story. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you guys. Bye.